Welcome back to Firebase Basics. Let's look at the Firebase Realtime Database, which allows data to be stored securely on Google Cloud servers and synchronized in real time across all clients sharing the same database. The purpose of the Real-Time Database feature of Firebase is to allow data to be shared between multiple clients, where a client can take the form of apps running on Android and iOS mobile devices, or JavaScript running on web server. Firebase uses what is known as a NoSQL database for storing data in the real-time database. Data is stored in the form of JSON objects. JSON is an acronym for JavaScript Object Notation. To add Firebase Real-Time Database support to an Android Studio project, we have to follow some steps. So let's head straight to Android Studio to do that. In the Tools menu, select Firebase. So we have the drawer of the Firebase with all Firebase menu. Now we're going to opt for the real-time database. Click on the save and retrieve data. We have connected to Firebase earlier. This time we need to add the real-time database to your app. Click on that. Those dependencies will be included in your Gradle file, so you need to accept changes. So you have your application set up to use up the Firebase database. Let's get to look at the dependency included in the Build Gradle, the module app. We have the Firebase database 10.0.1 version. We still maintain the Firebase auth, the Firebase UI, and the UI auth. This is actually going to create the sign-in and the forgot password out of the box from Firebase. So you have that set up and you sync Gradle. Afterwards, let's look at the layout files that we use to create the structure of this application. We have the activity sign-in and the real-time DB activity. The real-time DB activity is the launcher, just a constraint layer, an empty layout, which the Firebase auths can easily use to create a sign-in and other process. We have the activity sign-in, which is the input, the text, where you can easily type in message, and we have two buttons. The first to save, that's to save to the DB, and the second is to sign out after you might have signed in into your app. So we have that set up. In the classes, we have two classes, the real-time DB activity and the sign-in activity. The real-time DB activity is the launcher activity, which actually authenticates the user at first. That is, if you've signed in into the app already, you'll be moved straight to sign-in activity. But if you are yet to sign in, you have to do that before heading to type in your message. So we have this displayed this way: the Firebase auth declared, the request code 101 as an integer. Set the content view to the activity real-time DB, and you instantiate the auth to get the instance of the Firebase auth. Now you need to get the current user. You test if there's a current user, definitely it won't be null, but if not, it's going to return a null value. So if it's not null, definitely the user has signed in. Push the user down to the sign-in activity using the intent, and you finish that up so it won't get back to the previous page. Else, if the current user is null, you need to authenticate the user. That means the user needs to sign in. So you trigger this method, authenticate user. About we declare a list auth UI, that's the IDP config. This is a generic class from the auth UI, that's the Firebase authentication UI. Created an object called providers and you instantiate with an array list, because an array is a list. Now you need to add up to the provider. This is the fastest way to actually get the sign-in process set up out of the box for Firebase. Gets that done. Once you add the provider we're going to be using is the email provider. We've done that in previous tutorial, but we use our sign-in process, the email password, and also reset password. If few. I probably forget one. So we call the provider. That's the provider we want to use using the auth UI IDP config builder to declare that. Start activity for results to create a sign-in intent builder. You can set available providers. Set is smart lock enabled. You actually set this to false. This is a technology from Firebase and also runs in all Android devices. Well, you don't need to remember passwords. The password will be automatically filled up. So that's once you've inserted a password in any form, you have that saved. That's an auto save of the password called a smart lock enabled feature. So you build up and you pass in the request code, which is the integer declared earlier. On activity results, definitely you are expecting a result back. We have the IDP response objects over here. Check the request code of the request code gotten, and in the process you start the sign-in activity. That's through an intent to launch probably is on a successful sign-in to launches the user to the sign-in activity. So that takes us down to the sign-in activity where you need to log in your message and interact with the Firebase database in here. Here there are some static feeds created, private feeds, current user, the real-time DB, database, that's the Firebase database, and the DB reference, and also the user text. You all know that we are expecting a user text, and those buttons have been set up on click. So we'll declare and those methods that the two buttons we'll be using in this class. We set the content view to the layout that I showed earlier, and you initialize the user text, call this ID to that. Same thing goes for the current user. You get the instance of the Firebase auth and the get current user method that will actually get the particular user that signed in, and you test if the current user is null. You push back to the real-time DB activity for sign-in process, and if not, move on with the code. You get the instance to the database. This time the Firebase database get instance, pass it to the object database created, and the get reference as well from the database. This is the structure. We are starting to have the structure of the path to the messages, which is actually going to be in JSON, and we'll get to look at each node as time goes on. You add the value event listener to the DBref, pass the change listener, which instantiates the value event listener on the. So you have on data change, so you can get a copy. Because you're actually getting a copy of the edit text and passing it to the database. So that's the data snapshot. So you have that set up right there. So you can easily get a copy and get the user, the UID, and we have a child, which is the message. You get to see the part once I show that in the Firebase console, and you can have that done there. This time, just for simplicity, we need user text to be empty, so you clear it out on data change. You actually don't need to populate data to the edit text anymore, so that's why I have that empty. On cancelled, you notify the user, which actually takes a string parameters message, and this message passed in here is the database error exception, which actually toasts probably once you cancelled, and it notifies the user that you've cancelled the save to the DB. The save data method that's triggered on save button. Get the UID of the current user. The child, which is the message, that's the path to the message itself, and you set the value to the user text, which is the edit text you have in. Get the text, convert to string, and you send on another parameter, which is the completion listener. There are two parameters going into the set value, and the completion listener is over here. That actually overrides a callback called onComplete, which is triggered from the completion listener. You have two parameters, the database error and the database reference as the complete, and it's also notify the user if there's an error. So you still have the notify user method working there. And on sign out, you get the instance of the auth UI signed out from this activity, the add on completion listener, it's going to override the onComplete method, where you test if the task is successful. You start an activity which actually push down to the real-time DB activity that's on sign out. So you have that set up. This is just a straight mock which you can actually see how to save into DB, and we'll get to look at that in the Firebase console. Also practicalize this. We will be adding some level of security, or let me call permissions, as time goes on. A peep into your Firebase console, you click on the database. You can easily find the data, the rules, backups, and usage. We'll get to talk about the rules later on, but in the data section, you notice you have the practicing Firebase database flow message sent in, which we actually did from the device. So thank you guys for hanging out with me throughout this tutorial, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Have a wonderful time. Bye bye.